The voicemail came in at 7:02 a.m., and I knew my marriage was over before I finished listening to it, not because of what was said, but because of how casually it was said. "Hey, Aaron," my wife's voice began, light and rushed like she was walking between errands. "Just wanted to give you a heads up. We talked, and it makes more sense if you don't come tonight. It'll be simpler." Simpler. That was the word she chose to end 12 years. No argument, no build-up, just a logistical adjustment where I used to be. I sat at the kitchen table with my phone in my hand, the screen still glowing. Across from me, the chair she used to sit in was empty, pushed in neatly like it hadn't been disturbed. The coffee maker beeped, annoyed that I hadn't poured yet. Outside, a lawn sprinkler clicked on somewhere down the street, watering a yard that didn't need it. I replayed the message. Same tone, same speed, same certainty. I didn't call her back. I set the phone down and stared at the table, noticing the scratch near the edge for the first time. A thin white line from years ago when I dragged a box across it without lifting. I'd meant to sand it out. Never got around to it. Funny how damage sticks when you ignore it long enough. 12 years earlier, when I met Rachel, she told me she admired stability. She said it like it was a virtue she collected. "I like men who stay," she told me on our third date. I had enough chaos growing up. I believed her. I built my life around that belief. Her son Evan was 9 when we married. Smart kid, quiet, always watching. His biological father lived 3 states away and appeared in Evan's life the way storms do, unannounced, loud, and gone before anything could be repaired. Rachel told me early on, "You don't have to replace anyone." I didn't try to. I just showed up. I was the one at parent-teacher conferences. The one who learned which foods Evan hated and which ones he pretended to tolerate. The one who sat on the edge of his bed when nightmares woke him up, explaining that some people leave because they don't know how to stay. Rachel used to watch those moments like she was observing something useful. Whenever money came up, she'd squeeze my hand and say, "We're a team." When Evan needed a new laptop for school, it went on my card. When the roof leaked, my savings. When Rachel wanted to open a small design business that never quite made money, I told myself support was love in action. She used to say, "I don't know what I'd do without you." I didn't realize then that she meant financially. The voicemail hadn't explained who we were in that sentence, but I knew. Her ex-husband, Marcus Hale, had moved back into town 3 months earlier, said he wanted to reconnect with Evan, said he was in a better place now. Said a lot of things men say when they want a second chance without repaying the first debt. Rachel started mentioning him casually. "Marcus is actually being really mature. Marcus offered to help Evan with college planning. Marcus said he feels bad about how things ended." I listened without commenting. That was my mistake. The night before the voicemail, Rachel had said she needed space to think. I slept on the couch. By morning, I was no longer part of the equation. I showered, dressed, went to work like someone who hadn't just been quietly dismissed from his own life. At the office, I answered emails and nodded in meetings. Someone joked about weekend plans. I smiled automatically, then felt something hollow shift in my chest when I realized I no longer had any. At 11:30, my hands started shaking. Not panic, recognition. I took my lunch break early and walked to my car, sitting there with the door open, letting cold air hit my face. This wasn't a fight. Fights imply negotiation. This was a decision already made. That afternoon, I stopped by the bank instead of going home. I told myself I was just checking balances. That's how self-preservation begins, disguised as routine. The banker, Linda, had known me for years. "Everything okay, Aaron?" she asked, already pulling up my accounts. "Just want to review some things," I said. She turned the screen slightly so I could see. Mortgage, utilities, insurance, credit cards, auto payments. My eyes stopped on one line. A transfer I didn't recognize. Then another. Then a pattern. Small amounts, consistent, quiet. Rachel had been moving money into a separate account. An account with Evan's name on it. Not illegal, just invisible. Linda glanced at me carefully. "Want copies?" "Yes," I said. "Please." I sat in my car afterward, the paper warm in my hands, staring at numbers that no longer felt abstract. They felt intentional. That night, Rachel didn't come home. She texted instead. "Staying with Marcus. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." I didn't reply. I sat alone at the kitchen table, the voicemail still echoing in my head. Simpler. I realized then that I'd mistaken being needed for being valued. And those two things, once separated, never go back together cleanly. I didn't sleep. I didn't cry. I just sat there, listening to the refrigerator hum, watching the dark move across the windows, understanding slowly, clearly that no one was going to protect me except me. And for the first time in 12 years, that thought didn't scare me. It steadied me. At 8:36 a.m., the next morning, I realized something that made the silence in the house feel different. I wasn't waiting anymore. Not for an explanation. Not for an apology. Not even for her to come home. That surprised me. I stood in the kitchen holding a mug I hadn't filled, listening to the clock tick above the fridge. Each second landed clean and separate, like it was marking time I could finally account for. Rachel's coat was gone from the hook by the door. Her shoes, too. Evan's backpack still leaned against the wall, untouched. The house looked the same, but it felt like a place that had already decided who it belonged to. And it wasn't me. I went to work anyway. Habit is a powerful thing. It carries you when your mind hasn't caught up with reality yet. I answered emails, signed off on reports, spoke when spoken to. But underneath all of it, something else was happening. I was inventorying my life. At lunch, instead of eating, I opened a spreadsheet and started listing numbers, accounts, payments, obligations, things I'd been covering quietly for years without ever naming them as such. It wasn't anger that fueled it. It was clarity. That evening, I stopped at a hardware store on the way home. Not because I needed anything, but because I needed to be somewhere neutral. A place where no one knew me as a husband or a stepfather, just another man wandering aisles under fluorescent lights. When I got home, Rachel still wasn't there. No note, no call, just absence. I opened the filing cabinet in the hallway closet, the one she used to tease me about for being too organized. Inside were folders labeled by year, each one heavier than it needed to be. Receipts, invoices, bank statements. I sat on the floor and started opening them. There was the tuition payment I'd made when Evan's financial aid came up short. The orthodontist bill Rachel said Marcus had helped with, except his name wasn't anywhere on it. The credit card statements from the months her business hadn't made rent. I kept going. Then I found the newer stuff. Transfers I hadn't noticed before because they were designed not to be noticed. Small enough to slip past casual review, regular enough to add up. Rachel had been planning for a future that didn't include me, and she'd been using my present to fund it. I leaned back against the wall and let out a short laugh. Not bitter, not even sad, just surprised at myself for confusing loyalty with obligation. My phone buzzed. A text from Rachel. Evan's upset. He feels like you're pulling away. I stared at the screen, pulling away, as if I hadn't already been removed. I typed, deleted, typed again. Finally, I sent one sentence. I'm giving him space like you asked. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. No reply. That night, I slept in the bed. Not because I was pretending nothing had happened, but because I refused to exile myself from my own life any longer. I lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to the house settle, thinking about all the ways I'd slowly made myself smaller so things would feel smoother. I thought about the times I'd swallowed questions because asking them felt inconvenient. I thought about how often I'd chosen quiet over truth. Around 2 a.m., I made a decision. Not a dramatic one, a practical one, the kind that doesn't announce itself. The next morning, I called an attorney, not to threaten, not to retaliate, to understand. He listened carefully, asked precise questions, didn't interrupt when I explained the situation without embellishment. The house, he said after a pause. Whose name is it in? Mine, I replied. Bought before we married. That matters, he said. I hung up, feeling something unfamiliar. Prepared. Rachel came home that evening. She moved through the house like a guest who expected hospitality, put her keys down, opened the fridge, avoided eye contact. We need to talk, she said finally. Yes, I replied. We do. She sat. I stayed standing. I didn't mean for it to happen like this, she said. But Marcus is Evan's father. He deserves time with him. I never said he didn't, I replied. She frowned. Then why are you acting like this? Because I wasn't consulted, I said. I was informed. She crossed her arms. You're making this about money. No, I said calmly. I'm making it about honesty. Her expression shifted then. Defensive. Sharp. I didn't hide anything, she said. I slid the printed bank statements across the table. She didn't touch them. Silence stretched. You were planning, I said. Just not with me. She looked away. That was answer enough. I'm not fighting you, I said, but I am stepping out of the role you quietly reassign. What does that mean? She asked. It means I'm done funding decisions I'm not part of. She stared at me like I'd spoken another language. You wouldn't do that, she said. I already am, I replied. That night, she slept in the guest room. Evan didn't come home. I packed a bag, not in anger, in acceptance. I left before sunrise. The sky was pale and undecided, the way it gets when something is about to change whether you're ready or not. As I drove, I felt something loosen in my chest. Not relief. Alignment. For the first time, my actions matched what I knew to be true. And that, I realized, was the beginning of independence, not from her, but from the version of myself that believed being chosen meant staying silent. The first thing Rachel did after I moved out was assume I'd come back. Not because she said it, but because she behaved like someone waiting out bad weather. I stayed in a small extended stay place off Route 17. Beige walls, thin curtains, a desk bolted to the floor like it didn't trust anyone to leave. It wasn't comfortable, but it was quiet, and quiet had become valuable. 3 days passed without a word. Then the messages started. They didn't begin angry. They began confused. Did you forget to pay the electric bill? Evan's school emailed about the tuition balance. Why did the card get declined? Each text arrived like a misplaced assumption. I didn't answer right away. I was at work when the first call came through. Rachel's name lit up my phone, followed immediately by a voicemail notification. I didn't listen. I waited until I was back in the room that barely felt like mine and sat on the edge of the bed with my jacket still on. Her voice sounded different now, not rushed, strained. Aaron, she said. Something's wrong. The mortgage payment didn't go through. I played it again. She wasn't asking. She was reporting a malfunction. I listened to the second voicemail. Call me back. Please. Please was new. I didn't respond until the next morning. One sentence. I'm no longer covering shared expenses. The reply came fast. What does that mean? It meant exactly what it said. I went to work and focused harder than I had in years. When you remove emotional labor from your life, time appears where it didn't exist before. I finished tasks early, took fewer breaks, ate lunch without checking my phone. At 2:11 p.m., my phone rang again. This time, it wasn't Rachel. It was Evan. I stared at the screen longer than I should have. Then I answered. Hey, he said. His voice cracked on the word. Hey, I replied. Mom says you're mad, he said. That you're trying to punish us. I closed my eyes. I'm not mad, I said carefully. And I'm not punishing anyone. Then why did you leave? Because staying had become a lie. But you don't say that to a 17-year-old boy who's already been told one father left because he didn't care. I left because I needed to stop pretending everything was okay, I said instead. Silence. Dad, he started. He stopped himself. That hurt more than anything else so far. I don't know what's going on, he said. But Marcus says you're being unfair. Of course he did. Marcus doesn't know what I've paid for, I said. And neither do you. Another pause. Did you really stop paying for school? Evan asked quietly. I stopped paying for decisions I wasn't part of, I said. That includes being erased. He didn't argue. That scared me. After we hung up, I sat there staring at the wall, realizing this was the moment where people either doubled down or disappeared. I wasn't disappearing. The next week, Rachel showed up at my workplace. She stood in the lobby like she belonged there, arms crossed, eyes scanning for exits. I need to talk to you, she said when she saw me. Here isn't appropriate, I replied. She followed me outside anyway. You blindsided me, she said. You just cut everything off. I told you I was stepping out, I said. You didn't listen. You can't just decide that, she snapped. We're married. Yes, I said. But marriage isn't a lifetime subscription to my silence. Her jaw tightened. Marcus moved in, she said suddenly. Just temporarily, until things settle. There it was. The truth, finally unguarded. And I'm supposed to fund that? I asked. She didn't answer. That was answer enough. That night I met with my attorney again, not to threaten, to finalize. Papers were drawn up, accounts separated, automatic payments canceled or rerouted. The process was clinical, almost merciful in its lack of drama. Rachel didn't respond well. The text shifted from confusion to accusation, from accusation to desperation. You're ruining Evan's stability. If we not months, You're making this about pride. You promised you'd always be there. I read them without replying. Because here was the truth she didn't want to name. I had been there. So consistently that my presence became invisible. The final message came late on a Thursday night. If you walk away now, she wrote, you'll prove you were never really his father. I stared at that one longer than all the others combined. Then I typed back, being a father isn't proven by how much you tolerate being erased. I turned the phone off. The next morning my attorney called. She's contesting the separation, he said, claiming financial abandonment. Am I? I asked. No, he said. You're asserting boundaries. There's a difference, but only one of them sounds cruel to people who benefited from your lack of them. By the end of the month, the house was officially listed. Rachel found out through the realtor. Her call came in seconds later. You can't do this, she said. That's our home. It's my house, I replied. You just lived in it. I'd heard myself say those words before. This time, they didn't shake. She cried then, real crying. For a moment, I almost caved. Then I remembered the transfers. The planning. The voicemail that removed me without discussion. I didn't do this to hurt you, I said. I did it to stop hurting myself. She hung up. I sat alone in the quiet room and realized something important. This wasn't revenge. This was alignment. And once you feel that once your actions finally match the truth you've been avoiding, there is no going back. The mediation was scheduled for a Wednesday morning, which felt intentional in a quiet, bureaucratic way, far enough from the weekend to strip away emotion, close enough to reality that no one could pretend this was temporary. The building was old, not historic, just tired, beige walls, fluorescent lights that hummed faintly, like they were warning you not to expect warmth. The kind of place where people learn quickly that tone matters less than documentation. I arrived early, not out of nervousness, but out of respect for the moment. I wore a navy blazer and a clean shirt, nothing that tried to impress. Under my arm was a folder I'd assembled over several nights, each page placed carefully, not to win, but to be understood. Rachel arrived late. Her heels clicked too loudly against the tile, echoing down the hallway like she needed the space to notice her. Evan followed a step behind, shoulders tight, eyes fixed straight ahead. And then Marcus appeared, hands in his pockets, posture loose, expression calm in a way that only comes from not having much to lose. I hadn't seen him up close in years. He looked healthier than I remembered, more confident, like someone who'd walked back into a life already stabilized by someone else's work. The mediator introduced herself and gestured for us to sit. Let's keep this focused, she said. We're here to discuss property and financial responsibilities. Rachel didn't wait for an opening. He walked out, she said, pointing at me. He cut off support. He's punishing my son because he can't handle sharing space. The mediator raised a hand gently. Mr. Walker, you'll have time to respond. I stayed quiet and let her speak. That was the hardest part, listening to a version of myself that had been edited for convenience. Rachel talked about sacrifice, about partnership, about how I'd promised stability and then removed it without warning. Marcus nodded along, occasionally adding, Evan's just caught in the middle, like he hadn't lived there rent-free for 3 months. When the mediator turned to me, I stood and placed the folder on the table. It landed with a soft, decisive sound. I didn't walk out, I said. I stepped away from a role that was reassigned without my consent. I opened the folder, the deed, mortgage statements, tuition payments, medical bills, bank transfers, dates highlighted, names clear. Rachel scoffed. So this is about money? It's about honesty, I replied. Money just keeps records better than people do. The mediator adjusted her glasses and began reading. She didn't rush. That mattered. She looked up at Rachel. The house is titled solely in Mr. Walker's name. That's not fair, Rachel said. We were married. Yes, the mediator replied calmly, but marriage doesn't automatically transfer ownership. Marcus leaned forward then, elbows on the table. I'm Evan's father, he said. I think what Aaron's doing is wrong. That house was Evan's home. I looked at him for the first time since the meeting began. Really? I asked. Then why wasn't it your mortgage? Silence fell like a held breath. I've got receipts for the years you weren't there, I continued. Tuition gaps, insurance lapses, emergency expenses, all covered. Quietly, Evan finally looked up, not at his mother, at me. The mediator cleared her throat. Legally speaking, Mr. Walker has acted within his rights. Rachel's face flushed. So, he just gets away with it? I met her eyes. I didn't get away. I paid for 12 years. I just stopped pretending that was love. No one argued after that. The mediator closed the file. There's no standing here to contest the sale. We're done. Outside, the sunlight felt sharper than it had any right to. I stood on the steps for a moment, breathing, feeling the weight I'd carried for years finally settle somewhere that wasn't my chest. Evan came out last. I didn't know, he said quietly. I know, I replied, but knowing now matters. He nodded, didn't hug me, didn't apologize. Not yet. And that was okay. I walked to my car alone, the folder lighter than when I'd arrived. Not because I'd won, but because I'd stopped losing. The first night after mediation, I slept without setting an alarm. That alone felt unfamiliar. I woke just before sunrise in the small apartment I'd rented near the edge of town, where the road thinned out and the noise forgot how to follow you. No reminders on my phone, no obligations waiting in my inbox. Just light slowly climbing the wall like it had nowhere else to be. I made coffee and drank it standing by the window. Outside, a man walked his dog past the building, stopping to let it sniff the same patch of grass it sniffed every morning. The repetition felt grounding. Honest. Nothing pretending to be more than it was. That's when I realized something I hadn't expected. I didn't feel lonely. I felt unburdened. The sale of the house closed 2 weeks later. Quiet signatures, neutral smiles, no speeches. When it was done, I sat in my car for a moment with my hands on the wheel, breathing like someone who had finally reached solid ground after staying afloat too long. Rachel emailed once after that. Short, practical, forwarding address. One bill she thought I still owed. I forwarded it to my attorney and deleted the email. No reply. No explanation. Silence, when chosen, had stopped feeling like absence. It felt like structure. I settled into a rhythm. Work, walks in the evening, simple meals I learned how to cook without burning. On weekends, I drove out toward the river and sat with a folding chair and a thermos, watching the water move the way it always had, slow, patient, indifferent to human drama. It taught me something. Life keeps going whether you perform or not. About a month after the mediation, Evan reached out. Not a call, a message. Can we talk? I stared at it longer than I needed to. Not because I didn't want to, because I wanted to get it right. We met at a coffee shop halfway between our places. Neutral territory, no history in the walls. He arrived early, hands wrapped around a cup he hadn't touched. He looked older than I remembered. Not physically, aware. I didn't know about the money, he said after a while. About how much you paid. Mom never told me. I wasn't keeping score, I replied. I was keeping commitments. He nodded, eyes fixed on the table. I said things, he said quietly. Things I didn't understand. I know, I said. He looked up then. Why didn't you tell me? Because I didn't want you choosing between adults, I said. And because love isn't supposed to invoice itself. We sat with that. I don't expect things to go back, he added quickly. I just didn't realize what it cost you to stay. That's the thing about costs, I said. You don't feel them when someone else absorbs them. We finished our coffee. The hug we shared was brief, careful, honest. The kind you give when you're not pretending everything is fixed, but you're willing to stop pretending it was nothing. That was enough. I didn't hear from Rachel after that, and I didn't chase the silence. On Thursdays, I started stopping by a small bar near the river. Nothing fancy, no TVs turned up too loud, just a place where people talked without trying to impress. One night, an older man at the bar glanced at me and said, "You look like someone who figured something out late." I smiled. Better late than borrowed. Winter came early that year. The river dropped low, exposing rocks that had been hidden for decades. I liked that. There was something reassuring about seeing what had always been there once the water receded. Some nights I still thought about the house, the kitchen table, the way I used to lower my voice, shrink my needs, smooth things over before they had the chance to be honest. I don't do that anymore. What took me 12 years and one voicemail delivered without care to understand is this. Love without respect is just labor. And labor, no matter how noble, will eventually ask for payment. Walking away wasn't the dramatic choice. Staying silent was. If you're listening to this and you've ever felt yourself becoming optional in a life you helped build, if you've ever been told you mattered right up until you didn't, I want you to know something. You're not weak for leaving. You're late to your own clarity, and that's allowed. Before I go, I want to ask you one simple thing. If you've ever stayed too long, carried too much, or confused being needed with being valued, type 0 inches the comments. If you walked away and rebuilt your life anyway, even when it was quiet and misunderstood, type 1. No explanations necessary. Sometimes recognition is enough. And if stories like this, stories about quiet strength, delayed clarity, and choosing yourself without burning everything down, if those resonate with you, consider staying. Subscribe. I'll be here.